Hey everyone, how you doing today? It is Sunday, August the 1st. I am the Armored Otter and I am joined by the great Phil or Philip. How you doing today?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good actually. I'm just kind of sitting here get pretty stoked and getting ready to talk about Star Trek. So I'm it's the best way to start a Sunday.
It's one of my favorite topics. I actually got into a good discussion with my aunt after I think I sent you that video, but it broke
Yeah.
down DS9, and
Uh-huh.
she's the one that got me into Star Trek. So when I sent it to her, she was elated. She sat there and watched the whole thing, then got back to me. She was so happy that I sent it to her because it had so much information that she wasn't aware of. Especially because she's on the older side. She knows how to use the internet, but she's
Uh-huh.
not as versed with finding things like that. So she didn't know a lot of the backstage stuff that we take for granted that we know because we know how the internet works. So, but she didn't know
I
a lot of that
gotcha.
information. That was our first time hearing it, so she was over the moon, but just learning different things about the series.
No, it's great. I mean, that's one of the cool things about uh, the internet nowadays. Other than memes, but the fact that we have some much easier access to like a lot of the behind the scenes, the interviews, a lot of the kind of thought process that goes behind why. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Certain things happened. What they were thinking, and sometimes what they weren't thinking, and they kind of misstepped, especially next gen. That first season, they were kind of in retrospect, they kind of thought back for that was not such a good idea, but
Mm-hmm.
it happens. But yeah, I'm glad that she enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I saw that I was watching the video again actually last night in preparation for this stream, and it's just really cool. Watching how they're comparing some of the characters from past series, and especially with Nina Visor and wanting to find a for a Major Kira, and they wanted to do something different specifically with that character, right? They wanted to go in a different direction than you saw with a Counselor Troy or Nahura or even Doctor Crusher. So I just found that pretty fascinating.
They chose to they kept her in the cat suit. Don't get me wrong, they kept her in the cat suit the whole time. But yeah, she was more. I would say she was very more Worf than she was Troy.
Oh,
Throughout the
definitely.
series. And go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was gonna say definitely. I'm totally with you on that. There's a lot more Worf there than Troy, just with a cat suit.
Yeah. So, well, I enjoyed that character, but I still, wonder what could have been if they went with Ensign Rowe, or maybe later on included the character in there. Would it have been too much? Because I remember reading a pocket book, one of the pocket series that had after DS9 ended, it was like unofficial canon. And eventually in that pocket series, they have Rowe join DS9's crew, and and you know and Kira, she's the commanding officer. So while Kira's trying to fill in the role of Sisko, she's filling in the role that Kira used to have. But she also had this weird romance with Quark, which was odd. But but it wasn't too much, and it gave you a taste of what you would have gotten, had she had been there. Someone that was a little bit more in touch with her impulses in terms of, I guess, interpersonal relationships. Kira was always a little bit more staunch and, not as, I would say, emotional in terms of being affection until like season three, I would say, you know.
No, I'm with you on that, and I think it would have been a really interesting connection with the next generation. I think there would have been more of a connection between the two shows if Ensign Rowe was a part of the cast, as they were thinking originally. There may have been a little bit more crossover between the two series more often. We kind of saw like it here and there, but it was very very hands off. I mean, if anything, you'd see. I think the first thing that popped in my mind was Jonathan Franks's cameo as his twin, his evil
Yeah, as
twin,
yeah, what
Thomas.
was his name? Tom. It was Tom. Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, Tom,
Thomas Riker.
and yeah, and that was like the closest they really got. I mean, without like bringing someone all the way over to the show as or just as part of the cast. But yeah, I'm with you on that. It's one of those things that you could do in the headcanon. I think with if Ensign Rowe was part of the regular cast, I don't know. For me, at least, I believe that TNG and DS9 probably would have intermingled more often than not, as together, right? Maybe some of the arcs would have, kind of uh, pushed us, not pushed aside. What's the word I'm trying to? Oh my god, it's Sunday, and I just came from mass, so my brain's completely drained.
Mhm.
Sometimes the stories would, collided. There we go. They would kind of touch more often than
Mhm.
not, right? You might have seen more TNG involvement with like the Minion War, right?
Right.
And the Borg for DS9 and the other way around, which
And
that would have been kind
there
of
was a
cool.
reason. I remember someone. There was a reason why they didn't have the Enterprise involved in the Dominion War. I forgot what it was, but I think it had something to do with them being in the movies and they didn't want to cross contaminate or get too involved in it because it would take away from the story what they were trying to do. Like with First Contact and Generations and
Yeah,
whatnot. But we did get
yeah.
to see a lot of Galaxy classes act like battleships, which was interesting. Like these giant, space cruise liners just barreling, on these other ships in what three big action sequences that we had. I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty dope. I was like, I didn't know those Galaxy class ships were that agile in war. I was like, wow, they're just diving in
That,
like that.
and you know what? And that was all practical effects too. I found that so fascinating because I remember, when I first saw that, I know they were first described as heavy cruisers, and then they kind of gave it kind of a light retcon, I guess, and said, okay, we're gonna look at them more as battleships, but a little bit more agile, and especially in the battle for Cardassia and the Galaxy Wings, and then you see them
The
backed up.
Galaxy wings. I was going to bring that up. Like they had Galaxy wings. It's like that had to be monstrous.
Oh, I know. I know. If I was on the receiving end of that, I'd be like, you know what? I'm gonna warp the other way around, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.
You got to remember, like in Next Generation, when the other side heard that the Enterprise was on their way, they all got really scared and tried to leave the sector as quickly as possible. Now you're
Yeah,
talking about these huge wings of maybe 12 to 24 Galaxy class ships, which I didn't even know they had that many. Barely coming into a war, and it kind of gives you also a scope of how big this war is. They lost a lot of those ships.
yeah,
So
they did.
the Dominion was so powerful that the Galaxy classes were a big deal for the Cardassian and maybe even the Brain to a certain point. But the Dominions they ran through a lot of those huge powerful ships. We saw 3 of them destroy one in season 4. So
Yeah. I mean, you know what? We definitely next time we do a stream, Phil, we have to talk about the naval composition of Starfleet, the Romulan Star Empire, and Dominion, and all the other powers involved in that war. Because that in itself is going to be a heck of a conversation for us, like to break it down and be like, okay, because you're absolutely right. Because there's some really cool stuff that they did with the Galaxy class, the retrofits, skeleton crews, to kind of make up for the manpower. Because those ships were looking at like 1,000, 1,500 personnel per
easy,
vessel. Right,
easy,
and you're
yeah.
looking at 50 ships per wing, and that's not even including one fleet, two fleet, three fleets. I mean, that's a lot of manpower, but that's going to be super cool. We definitely we'll talk in behind the scenes about this if you're interested. We definitely
Of
do that.
course.
But yeah, let's get on the topic today. We are going to talk about some Cajun food, some Creole food. That's one of
Hey,
my favorite.
there's a difference between Creole and Cajun. Remember what Joseph said that his doctor's been here for 20 years. He still can't tell the difference.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. And I was gonna say, Creole is actually one of my favorite sort of foods because believe it or not, I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm from the island, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of cultural connections between our foods in the island and what you'd see in southern Louisiana with Creole food. And so when I first had some of that cuisine when I was visiting New Orleans, because I was working out in Mississippi a couple of years ago, I was blown away because a lot of seasoning was very similar to what we would have, right? The adobo, we call it sofrito. I can't
Mhm.
remember what they use in Creole, but in the Creole cuisine, but it's very similar, like base, right? There's like a tomato
Yeah,
base and
I'm
stuff like that.
very familiar with Puerto Rican cuisine. I'm Jamaican myself. I'm born here. My family's Jamaican, but my best friend, who I've known since I was 9 years old, is Puerto Rican himself. So he's still my best
Ah,
friend. So we've been
hop.
friends for 25 years now.
Oh
So
man, that's a lot of hot blood in this right there. I know that's our biggest complaint about us. We're like really hot blooded.
Yeah, I've seen him get into actual fist fights with his dad, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like malice. It was like, I'm going here. No, you're doing this. No, I'm leaving. Like, no, you're not. And then they're fighting on the lawn. I'm just standing there watching them. And it's like they
Yeah.
weren't trying to hurt each other. It's just like Clifton saying, that's his name, saying, I am not a child anymore. I am as big as you are, and I'm going to throw you on the ground, old man. And it was just hilarious to watch. And then just watch him, like, after they'll stop and they'll like say something to each other, stare, and just walk away. I'm like, there was no malice there. They're just
Cultures are great. I mean, I know some people, they see that, they're like, wait, what? I'm like, no, that's just how we are. All right. But yeah, okay, you're right. Creole is very different. It's not very different, but different from Cajun. And I mean, this has been a burning question because, and depending on what series you watch, and Star Trek, there's a lot of very different things that are said about economics, the lack of currency, how things work. And then because of that, people are guessing, right? Excuse me. Pardon me. You kind of have to guess. How would one person run a restaurant without a medium? There's no medium of exchange as we see it today, right? Our medium of exchange right now are hard currency, whether it's a dollar or a digital currency, Bitcoin. Right?
There's some kind of value. Yeah, there's currency to go around. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Picard made a very, very interesting comment in First Contact about what did he say? The acquisition wealth is no longer the driving force of our lives, which is interesting. But I think it was Kirk that made the comment was it Kirk or Picard too? But one of them made the comment about money non-existing, but they both said it as well. They both made very similar comments that money really didn't exist in the way us in the 20th and 21st century think it exists right now, right? They didn't have that. But it doesn't mean also at the same time, it's like we've seen in the last couple months, right? You got some people are like, it means that it equals communism, all right? I don't think it goes to that extreme. I mean, I'd love to kind of hear what you think about it, as Phil, because for me, it sounds more like what we're looking in Star Trek is more an economic model that just is not possible right now, or we can't comprehend.
That's exactly what it is. We can't comprehend it. When he told that to, what's her name, Millie? Is that her name?
Yeah.
When he was talking to her, she was blown away. She did not understand. She couldn't comprehend it, and we are very much her, because in the Star Trek universe, they have things called replicators. They don't need the things that we need, food and materialist and anything that's material. They can actually, as long as they have the energy, they can create it. So it loses its value to us. For us, we have to spend money to get materials to make certain things, to have our lights turn on. Their energy, power, food, resources aren't a problem for them anymore. So it's not, money cannot be the driving force behind anything. So when she asks, like, how much did all this cost? He's like, the economics of the 24th century are drastically different. And that's because they are. What they have is something completely alien to us in terms of what they need for resources, and how we go about living our lives. We go about getting things to get other things. Now they're set up to where they can pursue what they're interested in without being held back by resources, because their resources are abundant.
Exactly.
Overabundant.
No, you're right. And I think DS9 does a really good job of expanding on this question considerably, especially I tried tracking down this episode for like the life of me over the last week, but I've been like heck busy. Sisko made a comment because he was complaining to Kira about the cost of keeping the lights on DS9, and I was like, wait a minute. I mean, it's a Federation administered station, but it's also technically owned by the Bajorans. But again, it kind of expands the world of currency value, and you have the idea of Quark, also, gold pressed latinum and the Ferengi using that as their currency.
And you also don't understand completely.
I don't think any of us do, right? I mean, it sounds great. I want some. I don't know why. I just want some, right? I give me some gold press and lot, and I'll hide it somewhere. But do you remember an episode in TNG when the Federation, the Ferengi, and I believe it was the Klingons or the Romulans, they were bidding for a planet's wormhole that they thought was stable, and
Yes.
they were also they were going to give them some resources, technology. So there are mediums of exchanges, but as Script Doctor, mentioned in the comment right here, you know, money, that word that we use at right now is not the same thing as the way Star Trek in the 23rd, 24th, 25th century. It's not the same thing. Just like in languages, words change meanings and values over time. It's obvious that in the Star Trek universe, that has made a monumental change due to the environment they're in. As you mentioned earlier, you have the replicators that are able to essentially take care of just about everyone's essential goods, right? Food, water, shelter. So
Air.
it really changes air. So it changes
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I wouldn't even call it a problem. I call it an advantage. Once you take away obstacles from people, all they can do is pursue something that they're interested in, whether it's science or art, and that's exactly where they are. So
Yeah.
at the same time, how far does an interest take you? And I think that's where we go when we're talking about how does money work with a restaurant. It's like, how much do you really love cooking food to where you're getting up every day to do this just for the heck of it?
And that's a really good question, because I've worked in a few joints, growing, as a young man, trying to make my way through life, getting, we all, most of us has done it, and restaurant work is not easy, right? I mean, that is some hard work. So I imagine, waking up every single day, making the conscious choice, I'm going to do this because I love it. You know, there must be a great deal of passion, in my view, for Cisco's Creole restaurant, right?
I would hope so. I mean, I had to for this. I rewatched Homefront, which I think is where we spent the most time in the restaurant. And I was amazed. They have open time, they have a closing time, they have stock, they have food, and you can look at the food and say, well, it's replicated. Like, no, it's not, because Joseph talked about replicating food being slop. So everything you're eating is actual food. It's actual shrimp. It's actual potatoes and rice. All this is real. So where the heck is it coming from, and why are they giving it to you? I doubt he
Yeah.
has acreages of land to grow and raise animals to slaughter and still run a restaurant on his own. So I'm not sure if it's a plot hole or something, but where's all this coming from? This is kind of the thing that the Maquis, they prided themselves on. They grew their own food, and that made sense because that's all they really did. If you're either
Yeah.
fighting or you were farming. This guy's running a restaurant in the middle of New Orleans. So where's all this stock coming from, and
Well,
how are you getting it for free?
well, I mean, I know he made a comment later in the series that he grew some of the vegetables, but you're
Yes.
absolutely right. A lot of that stock, I have my own garden, right? I grow a lot of my own vegetables, but as much as he had there to produce as much food, that's a lot of work. I mean, anyone who's done any sort of farming, that's a heck of a lot of
It's a lot
work
of
and
produce.
space. That's a
Yeah.
lot of produce. And then he's also running a restaurant. He's also cooking the food, speaking with the customers, having that engagement there. I can't see, Joseph having all that time, especially as an older gentleman, being able to, farm, manage, cook, and then be the face. That's just a lot. So that's an excellent question. Where is he getting a lot of the resources? I can see him, maybe supplementing some of his supply, but it can't be all of the supply. And it goes to the question again, where's that motivation that people have to exchange goods and services without
A
some
tangible
sort of
return.
return?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's not alone. He has Nathan, his sous chef, that's always smiling and cooking behind him. So it's not just him. And then he had his daughter Judith, which is I believe is Cisco's half sister, and send her home. He does cheese because he doesn't want her there, or they couldn't get along, or something about Sisko saying she'd never, or no, he said that she doesn't ever cook the gumbo spicy enough. That's a joke, but we don't know why she really stopped coming, other than she's sending her home. He's sending her home because maybe he wants to do things his way. So there's there's other things to talk about. There's like, you have employees, so he's not. I've seen people serving tables, so it's not just him. So you have him. You can argue that he's a chef and he loves being a chef. I like cooking, but running, like as you said, running a restaurant and cooking are two very different things.
Exactly, and they're not easy. I mean, and then running a small business. I've had my hand on that too, and that's a hell of an enchilada. You gotta slap together. I think honestly, and I'm gonna start theory crafting myself, because a couple hundred years they're post scarcity, right? The Vulcans came in. What was it, like the 2200s, around there. So it's been a couple hundred years since the Vulcans came in after the Third World War, after Cochrane's warp ride, as we saw in First Contact. Humanity has gotten past poverty. We're going to completely ignore what we saw in Picard. That just didn't happen because I just don't have enough alcohol in my system to even think about that. And there was a massive cultural shift. And because of that, people's attitudes towards exchange may have changed, right? Mm-hmm. But that fundamental desire to have purpose may have not, right? That's part. And as you and I, we work full time. We both know a big part of working is not just being able to pay the bills, but also it's part of your identity. It's part of your purpose. It's part of what you do. And I think that as you move to a post-scarcity society, that instinct might replace a lot of what gets taken away when monetary value or that exchange lessens greatly, because you no longer have that exchange anymore. What do you think?
Well, it makes sense. If you go back to what you said, our ability to work is part of our identity. When you take away the reason for working, which is to put food on our tables, you have a family, I have a family, we have to keep a roof over our house and food on the table. Once that's not an issue anymore, then all you're left with is finding your purpose. And I think that might be the main driving force behind what he's doing. He's a chef, and he wants to be a chef. And he even said, when we said to Sisko, I didn't raise you to be a starship captain or a messiah. I raised you to be a chef, and look all good it did me. So this is what he wanted for him and his family. And every time he sees Jake's working in the in the restaurant, and again he had his daughter there. So it is very much a family passion that Sisko takes with him on DS9. And so it goes back to, if you're not working for money, you're not working for resources, you're working for a purpose. But then I have to ask, what is that guy driving the buggy out, the horse and carriage outside? What is he doing? Are you telling me his purpose is to show people the city? That's what I'm not gonna bag on it. It's a good gig to do, especially in tourism. But once you're not working for money, you're a tour guide for fun. Interesting.
I mean, what? Everyone has, I guess, their own identity they like to lock onto, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. Kirk, Picard, other commanding officers throughout the different TV shows and the movie iterations have made very similar comments to that, where people were instead of going towards the acquisition of wealth, as Picard, everyone loves to point at that Picard said, it's about that self-improvement, it's about finding that passion. And people, that game Palinko they see on TV sometimes, everyone goes down the little tube and they get fit, they find their purpose, they find where they go, whether it's Starfleet, whether it's being, working the land, whether it's being a chef. You find out really quick, what you're capable of. And I think there's also a bit of social expectation from people, because you see, as you made the comment about of Joseph, telling Ben, I raised you to be a chef. So there seems to be still societal pressures in place for you to do something, right? Hey, I expect you to do something. You may not have to make money, but you are expected to find a place in society, something that is, um, well, I don't want to say well worth it, but something that, is tangible, whether you're a chef, a photographer, you're in Starfleet, or in the Federation, vast Federation bureaucracies. There's a spot for you somewhere, so long as you're willing to push forward.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to like just run down individual captains. What was they have? They all had interests outside of being a Starship fleet captain. I don't remember what
Yep.
Kirk's was, other than just spreading his seed across the cosmos. But
Green women, right?
yeah, all over the place. Him and Riker just all over the place. But I know Picard, he was an archaeologist. That's what he did. He was when he wasn't working as a captain, he was an archaeologist, and he was a small he loved his family was they ran a wine a vineyard.
Yeah.
After Picard, he had Sisko. Sisko was, again, he was a chef first, but then he also got to archaeology and looking into the past due to his being the emissary. It was mostly talking about Majoris, but he also was a buff in African our African history as well. You can see in his quarters he had different little adornments around.
Oh yeah.
And Janeway, she was a scientist. I'm not sure if there was any like particular avenue I remember, but physicist.
Yeah. She was a physicist. She was a science officer and then went to command, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So anytime we weren't watching her give interesting orders, she was researching. So.
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. Even Jonathan Archer, he was a oh my god, he was just an explorer all around. He also I don't think it was engineering, but I think no, it was engineering. His father,
he was an engineer. His father was one of the first interstellar spacecraft that Earth produced.
Yeah, he was the Warp 5 engine. So you're absolutely right. Each of the starship captains that we saw in Star Trek had outside passions, from what we saw in their commands, which also gave depth to their characters, because we saw plenty of episodes with, Picard shirtless in a in an Indiana Jones style.
And he wore it well. I mean, for an older gentleman, he wore it well with the ground beef all pepper, the salt and pepper ground beef all out and well defined. Like you're pretty well shaped older gentleman.
Right. He did it well. And then, of course, Sisko history. I think my favorite by far was when he took Jake for that solar sail, the Bajoran solar sail that took the stream directly to the Cardassian solar system. That was just killer. Like, I think that really played to his love of history, engineering, and just that curiosity, figuring out.
He was an engineer as well, because remember he was into spacecraft design. He built the Defiant, following the Borg incursion. So
you're right. He was a shipbuilder. He was a designer. You're absolutely right. I've totally forgot. And so okay, you're right. So everyone basically, they're a captain, but they had these secondary. I don't want to say secondary, but they had these other passions that really complemented their ability to command, that made them unique people. And I think you'd see that also with Joseph. And the way he ran his business, right? Because he was able to run his business. He was able to negotiate. He was a damn good cook, but he was also able to handle employees, handle customers, handle inventory negotiations. So it showed that, I mean, if that character was here modern times, he could totally run a restaurant and make Gordon Ramsay, cry and enjoy.
I was going to say he can also handle his son. Remember that speech he gave him after he cut his hand, and he made a good point about it's like if I was a really good shapeshifter, I would just find a poor soul on the street, drain him of all his blood, and and release it on command. I was like, that's a really good point. I mean, for a civilian, that was scary good.
Yeah. It was, but I mean, it goes to show you. I mean, and that's the one really amazing thing about Star Trek, that in the franchise in general, up to Enterprise, that they did was, they did not knock on just being brainy, right? They made it very clear that, hey guys, there's other sorts of intelligence out there, And sometimes just because you're brainy doesn't necessarily mean that, or strategic doesn't mean you're going to get the solve the problem. Overthinking is super common problem, especially for people who think they're extremely intelligent. And sometimes a layman is gonna see it much easier than you are, because you're staring at the grain of sand instead of the entire beach.
Right.
But yeah, that's wild. I totally forgot about him cutting his hand like that. That was I think Paradise Falls or something like that. But yeah, that was a good episode.
Yeah, I think that was his second. That was after Homefront. So
After Homefront.
yeah, it was, it
Yeah.
was a, it was a two-part. Homefront and Paradise or something like that. Yeah, and I watched them both today just 'cause I knew that was the most we saw of the restaurant itself. I know we saw it again at the end of season 6, and then I think at the beginning of season 7. I'm not sure, but I know we saw the end of season 6 after Dax died. He took a vacation to Earth to sort out his feelings.
Yeah. And looking at the restaurant, I mean, it's fully furnished. There are chairs, there are plates. So, you're looking at it, and I'm sure a replicator can make a lot of that, right?
Right.
But at the same time, going back to our earlier discussion, I'm also sure there's going to be plenty of people who are going to want to be carpenters, who are going to want to just get busy with their hands. We've seen that with again with Sisko rebuilding the Bajoran wind sail. Oh my, there's another example of this, but there's another. I'm trying to get it back in my mind, but there was a captain. They just had this really bad habit of getting old stuff and putting it back together. For some reason, I keep thinking about freaking Tom Paris and his Captain Proton crap right now, and that's
Well,
just
no, Tom did that too. He restored cars in the Hollow Fleet, and he rebuilt the shuttlecraft that ended up taking over his brain or something like that. It happened a couple times, so I don't know.
You know what? That's what it was. And for some reason, I kept thinking of Captain Proton. I was just, oh my god!
You were close. You were close, but exactly what he did. He loved restoring old vehicles or things he thought were old. Remember, I forgot the name of the episode, but the shuttle that they acquired again. It happened again in Voyager. They acquired something. I don't remember what they gave the merchant, but he threw in the shuttle because he was trying to get rid of it, and he restored it. It took over. It had some kind of AI, and it took over his thoughts, and it forced him to do things. I forgot. It was a pretty interesting episode, but it goes back to the idea of exchanging goods. I think they exchanged some things that the Voyager had, and that was plentiful for it, but I don't remember what Tom put into the pot to get the shuttle, other than it may have something that they could use. But I was like, I don't remember what you can offer someone in the Delta Quadrant, but you're supposed to have barely any resources to yourself. But hey.
No, of course. I think overall the big picture is, Phil, the fact that in the micro level within the Federation, or at least within Earth, there really isn't so much of an exchange as of items, that there's just an exchange of time amongst each other. I want to do this because I want to do this. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna be alive, right? I have the best health care in the alpha beta quadrant, so I might as well. But on the macro level, outside the Federation, as the Federation deals with the other galactic powers, there are still meanings of exchanges, as we saw with the Ferengi and their use of gold press platinum, or the Federation, as Script Doctor made a comment about earlier, using resources as specifically resources that cannot be replicated as a medium of an exchange, right? To gain whether sometimes strategic value from another planet, civilization, or even in bartering chips. So there's still exchanges going on, and that's and all these examples I like to bring up because we have people who make claims that Star Trek is this current economic model, right? And it's bothersome because it's not, because Star Trek, and I think it's the entire point of the show. It's not, look, this is what we are. It's what we can be, right?
Right.
So it's the idea of not abandoning, but outgrowing what we have now for something better later, and trying to attach it to and that current economic model, regardless of what your cup of tea is, I believe kind of misses the point.
I agree. I agree. It's probably good to talk about what are some things that can't be replicated. Like it would be sources of power, like dilithium. They can't replicate dilithium, or specific pieces of technology, like
Yeah,
different power matrices. You can't you can build them from parts that you can replicate, but you can't actually replicate the entire thing by itself. Anything that's too complex. So what ends up happening is you are exchanging something. You're exchanging your knowledge. You're exchanging your gifts and your ability to build something that someone else can't do. And I saw a lot. There's a lot of barter systems going. Like when Jayway went back to the past, she exchanged some kind of matrix with a Klingon to get I forgot what she was getting from them. I forgot what it was, but they were exchanging goods. They weren't exchanging money. So even though if you talk about exchanging of money, Quark got an awful lot of of latinum from the officers throughout the 7 seasons. They always had money, and I'm like, they don't get paid. So where are they getting this money from?
Okay, that's a great question. Two things though. There was one episode with Janeway. They in Voyager they got hijacked by this starving group of aliens. They wanted replicator technology, and she kept using the Prime Directive as an excuse why they couldn't give it to them and whatnot. And I just bring that up because that's how much a game changer that sort of technology is for any civilization. Phil, if we were to wake up tomorrow and someone were to pull out a replicator from the rear ends, I guarantee you $1,000, that $1,000 wouldn't mean shit. Right?
Yeah.
Because it would flip this whole world upside down. I would hope in a good way. I am sure in a great way.
What actually, let's be honest. If we woke up tomorrow and there was a readily usable hydrogen engine that's portable, that could be used, it would be warred over by all kinds of corporations, either to have it themselves or to stop it from coming out. So
yeah, but let's just say it's open source and it's too late. The cat's out of the bag. It would be. I mean, it would be a game changer, right? Like it would. It would take the entire chessboard of what we think how the mechanism of our economics works and we'll knock it right the heck out of the table. And I just bring that up because a lot of us, especially as fans, we kind of fail to realize that, especially in really well-to-do countries like the United States, we kind of take for granted how easy it is to go to a store and pick something up, right? Now imagine you're in Star Trek universe. You can go to your kitchen and replicate yourself something instead of going to the local Albertsons or Publix or something like that. I mean, that's the level of ease that you're seeing there that they have, and that's why
not just raw materials, but you're full on 3-course meals that you don't have to worry about at the highest quality. Yeah, you can argue about if it's real or not, but it's not just like I want a potato. It's like you can get whatever you want right now, and that changes dynamic automatically in terms of what's available to people. I mean, that kind of technology would end wars.
Yeah, it would end wars. It would do something else. It reminds me. Remember The Fifth Element with Lilu when she had the plate of chicken and she put that. Yeah. I don't know what the hell that was.
The rehydrator thing. Yeah.
Yeah, she just slapped that sucker back in the nuker and came out a brand new chicken. I'm like,
yeah,
I want stop fixing everything else, guys. Get that microwave to my house. I want that. But yeah, pretty much. No, you're right on with that. And
not just that. The thing about the health, because this food is pure. So there's no detriment to eating anything you want because it's all replicated. So there's no trans fats or unnecessary. It increases the ability to just live. Your health will increase automatically because of what you're eating doesn't have any side effects that we're dealing with today because of cholesterol and things of that nature. So it's just it would change everything. So it also goes back to like if what Joseph's doing, is it really good for the surrounding community to introduce all that hard actual cooking back into their lives when they've lived their entire life basically as vegetarians? Most people have anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. You make that comment, and first thing that pops in my head is how often are they going to have to get a hypo spray for an upset stomach, right, or visit a med bay, because they're their stomachs are not used to digesting rich food like that. They may have had replicated food, but you and I both know the difference between some real hardcore spices versus something that a computer would mock up. And I don't know. For me, I've seen what happens to someone who's been, I'd say, vegetarian, vegan, and then they return eating meat for some whatever, like for a medical reason. And you can see the difference, right? Like it affects their body because their bodies are not used to it and they have to make an adjustment. So I'd imagine that his patrons would have to make that same adjustment from replicated food to fresh food. And I think that would be part of the appeal of going to his restaurant, right? Is that being able to say that you did it. Because we see it now, don't we? Where people go to a drive-in, not because it's the best way to see a movie, just because of that nostalgia factor. And I think that could also attract, potentially at least, customers for him.
Oh, I just thought about something. It's not just the nostalgia factor, but it is also, you're also controlling your own environment. You can do whatever you want in your car. You don't have to worry about, rules of a theater. You can bring, they say you can't bring anything into the drive-in, but who actually listens to that rule? What if, restaurants and situations like Joseph have is actually what helped fuel the Maquis. The whole point of the Maquis, most of them was because they were living on these outer ring planets. They're on the edge of Federation space, and they and after a treaty, they were given away to the Cardassians to maintain peace. Well, most of them were out there because they didn't want to be part of this newer culture that the Federation and the other civilizations have actually, have cultivated. They wanted to live like the way they wanted to live. They wanted to go back to their cultures that that they've known and not maybe they haven't grown up with, but their ancestors grew up with, and they wanted to be more connected to the land. And I would think that kind of movement on Earth, where we're not eating this replicated food, all our stuff is real and it's grown and it's organic. It's just the same kind of mentality the Maquis had. Well, one of the mentalities, one of the reasons why they chose to stay away from the Federation. And while they're Federation citizens, they weren't really part of the Federation. Which is why some of them were able to stay, on the other side of the border and stay with the Cardassians, even though it turned out pretty bad because you're staying with Cardassians, and Cardassians are historically not great people, just because of their culture, not because of who they are. I don't want to say that all Cardassians are evil, because we know that's not true. But their culture doesn't really lend itself to be hospitable to non-Cardassians.
I mean, I know I would love for one to be my tailor.
Oh, yeah. Just for the conversation alone. Yeah.
Oh, my God. It would be so entertaining. But, you're absolutely right, because look at today, right? We have the Mennonites, right, who have said the 18th century, the 19th century, boom, that's where we're going to, time freeze. We have people who are like, we love organic. We don't want anything altering our food. That's what we're going to do. I absolutely agree. I can see people in the 24th century saying, I only want to live this way, the way my ancestors did. I want to maintain my traditions. I know, was it TNG? I think it was either TNG and Voyager, but there was a planet where Native Americans ended up immigrating to out of Earth to have their own planet.
It was TNG and Voyager, yeah.
Yeah. So and they were still within Federation space, Federation protection, but they, for the most part, they were pretty much self-governed, right? They were it was so that way they can live the way they wanted to live. Again, not that much different than the way the Amish live in the United States.
Very much, yes. I was going to
speak
that same point.
States. Yeah, so you're in the United States, you live the way you want to, but you have your own enclave. That's the word I'm looking for. Jeez, my little mental dictionary is off. But yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head, and seeing that happen in the show, on these different shows multiple times, again, points to the evidence that you said that there would be plenty of people who would find enjoyment. Hey, I want to be a restaurateur. I want to.
But we saw it more than once inside DS9. Remember that episode where him and Colm Meaney's character, Chief, the Chief, I forget
O'Brien?
the Chief's name. O'Brien. Remember they got stuck on the planet because there was an artificial field being generated shut down all technology, and they were trying to get off, but the people there, what the lady there that was in control wouldn't let them pursue any means of leaving, and then they found out that she was controlling it the whole time, and they kept putting people in boxes. It was crazy. It was a great episode, but
it was. No, you're absolutely. Oh my, you know what that reminded me of? Remember Futurama when Bender downgraded himself and turned into like a wooden robot?
Yeah,
it kind of reminded me of that. But I totally forgot about that episode. Yes, you're right. So again, I mean, these series, there have been plenty of examples that, and you're right, the Federation's vast. I think like when I saw the episode, I think it was yesterday, the day before, Riker was given the opportunity to take command of Ares, to explore the Gamma sector or something like that. Take command of the Ares as the captain, and just to kind of give you an idea how vast the Federation is, months in high warp just to get there, just to be able to get to that spot and explore it. I can imagine that there's a lot of, in between there and that spot and the Sol system, Vulcan, and anywhere else in Federation space, it's so huge. There are plenty of enclaves where people are just saying, you know what, replicated technology is great, but we're still going to do this. We're still going to have well water. I mean, I see here, even in southern New Mexico, there are plenty of communities here that they have the conveniences of modern technology, but they choose to, I guess, honor a form of living that is more accustomed to their culture, which is very admirable. It's very interesting to to witness yourself, but it is not unique to this area, because I've seen it done all over this country, outside of this country. So I'd imagine that if it's a very, very common human trait, and you can see it all over the planet, this aliens in the Star Trek universe could be kind of like that, especially within the Federation. Joseph Sisko is going to have plenty of customers who are going to be coming in and out of Earth who are going to be like, I have not had Creole before. Let's do this.
Yeah, if you look at that again, if you go back to Homefront, you actually see a Vulcan eating at the restaurant, but you wouldn't expect to see a Vulcan eating Creole food with so much spices. And I thought that was like a little, and it looked like he was enjoying it. Again, strange to see enjoyment on a Vulcan face. Maybe that just been someone not paying attention to their walk-on role, but it was interesting to see. It wasn't just humans there; it was people of different races enjoying the food. And not to mention, at the end of Fallen Paradise, or whatever the second part was, at the very end, when he opened his restaurant back up, there were people piled outside to come in. So it wasn't just something that, a couple people here and there do. Every time we saw that restaurant, if there wasn't some kind of cloak and dagger or a clandestine conversation going on, that was packed. It was people there all the time. So...
Good point, Script Doctor, about spice not affecting a Vulcan. They eat termites. That's yeah. I mean, if they can knock down a termite, I guess some.
No, I didn't mean it would bother them. I mean, Vulcan food is either really bland, or I've heard also Neelix talk about something being really spicy, depending on what you're talking about. So yeah, I didn't think it would bother them, but their foods typically are very plain. And they're like, we made a soup for a Tuvok one time. And he's like, is it sufficiently bland or something like that? I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's so weird. And you know what? It goes against to the whole, they look so similar, but very different. I would imagine that the palate, going from species to species would be very different, right? A Trill looks like a human with spots and a symbiote, but doesn't mean that the palate's going to be the same. We might love a pizza. They look at a pizza and they might get really grossed out with it. So
forgive me. I misremembered that. He gave him his soup, and Tuvok said, you changed it. He's like, yeah, I spiced it up. He's like, so the whole point of the soup was for it to be bland, and Neelix puts some kind of spice in it, and then he didn't appreciate that, of course.
That is so funny. And then you know what? That's a really good observation about Voyager too, because Neelix having to cook for a bunch of a crew that's mostly human. Don't get me wrong, there's some Vulcans in there, but it's mostly human. And
it was more Vulcans than we were led to believe, because I remember during the Pong Far episodes, they're like, is he not? Asking if they're more compatible with any of the other Vulcans on like any other. I know Vorik, and I know Tuvok, and I think there's a female around there somewhere, but that's it.
You're right, and you're right because they mostly all these shows always talk about the bridge crews, and we kind of forget that there are hundreds of peoples per vessel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Neelix has got to. This guy don't know what. I'm sure he don't know what humans like before he met us, or Vulcans, and he's like, okay, I'm just gonna throw some shit together and num num num. Let's see, script doctor, copper based palette, our iron. You know what? That's a really good point. A copper based palette versus our iron based one would be very interesting to study. Just like copper.
Let me go find a penny.
Right. Yeah, you're right because our senses would be different. How the receptors would receive it. I would imagine that the intake of dairy, wheat, gluten, meats would, and even textures would be different for a species that had a copper based palate instead of one like ours, right? Like humans. So seeing the Vulcan enjoy it, maybe it goes to show that the passion that Joseph has for his cooking, maybe he, on the menu, and this is just really theorizing in headcanon, I wouldn't be surprised that he formulated some Creole food, studied his customer base, and experimented here and there, and figured out ways to really ignite it for, I don't know, Vulcans or for Klingons or for other species to kind of give them a taste of that cuisine, right?
Right. Well, yeah, that does make sense because if you're looking at it from that angle, he is on Earth. That is the epicenter of the Federation of space, and the Federation. I guess the two biggest species within the Federation are humans and Vulcans. So his customer base is probably going to be that, especially being on Earth and being on the same continent as Starfleet headquarters. Which for us still, covering the United States can take hours in a plane in a straight shot. For them, it's minutes. It really is. It's either they're getting transported there or they're jumping on a shuttle, and shuttles travel much faster than airplanes. So it's not much of a trip to go from San Francisco to New Orleans. I believe.
Oh yeah.
Joseph even said, he said, remember when you're down here, get yourself down to New Orleans. I'm like, that's right. It's only a few minutes away. Even by shuttlecraft, it's only a few minutes away. If you want to just transport there, it's instantaneous because they have transport pads across that that can circumvent the planet or at least the continent. I remember that much. So,
and that's wild, Phil. Imagine that. I mean, I feel like some bulgogi. I'm gonna head to Seoul, right?
Yeah.
Not to
interrupt you, but that does actually put a hole in our argument about it not being really realistic. If you have transporters, getting produce really wouldn't be that hard if you were finding co-ops around the planet. It's basically just figuring out how are you going to, again, we're not pay for it, but how are they just sending you, their produce, but getting it there, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal for us. We're thinking about how do you transport that much produce, to your restaurant every day? Like, well, it's not a big deal, is it?
You're absolutely right. And I'm sure there are plenty of communities within Earth and ways for people to communicate with each other to be able to say, hey, I have this, who needs it, right? Just like you have currently, whether you have Discord communities, Reddit communities, Twitter communities, Facebook groups, right? I'm sure in the 24th century, they have better platforms that aren't so, insane, that people come together and, hey, I have a crap ton of radishes and green onions. I need this. Who wants it? Who wants to kind of move some stuff around? So you're right, because as I was saying earlier, I imagine being in the 24th century and saying, I live in southern New Mexico, but I really feel like having some bibimbap. I'm going to go to Seoul for the evening, pick me up some, eat it there, head my butt back home, and not even take more than 20 minutes.
Not even 20 minutes.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That'd be insane.
I can go from Florida to Italy and be back in a few minutes. Just call ahead, pick it up, and come right back home and take minutes. That's assuming if you have to bother with a shuttlecraft, you can just transport yourself there. But I'm not sure how, abused transporters are. But if they're like as commonplace as using a car, Wow.
And Script Doctor makes a really good point here.
Tube
On Earth
transit. They
Found,
do have tube transit. I forgot
yeah.
about that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that people can run around the planet, especially, and it looks like they have plenty of different ways for short, medium, and long form travel in on planet, right? Excluding having to leave the planet. So there, and it goes back to your point. There are plenty of ways for people to be able to, as Joseph said, make sure you get home in time for dinner. There's plenty of ways for Ben to be able
Yeah,
to do
because
that
he
as
worked.
well.
They worked in San Francisco, and they were staying with Joseph, because I remember Jake saying he didn't want to stay there because he'd have to peel potatoes or cut onions, and then Cisco corrected him, like, "No, you're too old for that. You'll be waiting tables." So,
Which is good character builder. I think everyone at least once should have to do that.
oh yeah,
Right. Got to wait. Got to work a restaurant at least once in your life to get an appreciation for it, because that is not easy work. Oh man, now I want to have some food. Oh, okay. So I'm all sitting here like my stomach's like, it's 1 o'clock. You can treat yourself, and I'm like, oh, I will. I will soon enough. All right. Oh man. So interesting. So I'm now that you mention it, so we for the most part, it seems that again it goes back to the idea that none of these methods of Joseph being able to find his career, his calling, supplying it, running it, and making it successful is anything that would match any current economic model that we can even think of right now. Even if we were to go back to the feudal times, current, or even models that we're even theorizing currently, none of that would even you know um, make it possible. And a lot of it, again, is because of replicator technology and the fact that Joseph and all of them, thanks to Vulcans intervening on Earth, they live in a post-scarcity planet. I think that post-scarcity aspect of human society was that game changer.
I agree. Yeah, that changes everything. It switches everything from working for necessity to
Uh-huh.
working for purpose. So,
Exactly. And then, and we've seen this time and time again. You're right, because Kirk has a place in Alaska. So does Riker, has a place in
mhm.
Alaska. You have the family vineyard for Picard in France. So, and of course, the Cisco's Benjamin Cisco's family home, the Cisco's family home in New Orleans, the restaurant. So there's private property in Star Trek.
Yeah, that goes to you have to ask that question. Is like that vineyard's on a huge plot of land. How do you determine ownership? Is there ownership? Is it just did he just walk up and said let's start planting? Because to own land, you have to buy it. Is in our world, you have to be purchased, or maybe it was just
oof.
passed down from a time when there was money, but because it was owned by their family, when they transitioned from money or currency, it stayed within their family.
Knowing how we work as humans, we have a bad habit, and it's not a bad habit, right? We have a habit of kind of borrowing from the past, right? Like
Mhm.
squatters' rights, common law is law that we have in this country that was old English law that predates this country for centuries, and a lot of our legal theory comes from that. So I'm sure that getting back to Star Trek, I'm sure that the way property works in that universe, they must have carried over some idea of how to acquire property. We may not know exactly the exact mechanism of how, but there is an acquisition of property. But more importantly, a recognition by the state it is your property,
Right.
right? Which I think is pretty interesting. A planet that's so huge. I mean, Earth is big, but what I mean by huge, there's a lot of freaking people,
Mhm.
including all the aliens, the Federation citizens as a whole. It's not just a human centric planet. You got Vulcans, you got Tellarites, you got a lot of people there.
But not to
They,
mention, you got to think about something. Our
huh?
our world is our world is big, but it's made smaller by the ability to live in certain places. Be going back to scarcity is not an issue anymore. Scarcity is not an issue anymore. You can get what you need wherever you are. So the human race was able to expand into areas of our planet which were inhospitable to us because there was no resources there. Now that doesn't matter. So
You're right.
people can live anywhere they want. They can live in the middle of the jungle. They can live in a desert. They can live in a frozen tundra and not have to worry about how I'm going to provide, sustenance for my family or myself.
That's killer because that makes me think about the Tibetan steppes, right? There's a lot of land in occupied Tibet right now that is very arid and almost inhospitable. That's why there's only so few people, not a lot of people who live there because it's very difficult to develop agriculture. And you're right. With technologies such as you see in Star Trek, I could see a metropolis spring up there. Or how about the Sahara, right? You can't really have
Script
a
doctor just
metropolis
said the
in the Sahara.
Mojave. He just brought that
The,
up.
there you go. The Mojave Desert, or even right next to me, a couple miles away, my desert over here. And the only reason we have people living here is because we have the Rio Grande right next to us. You go about 30 miles to the west, it's empty, it's desolate because again, no water. But once that scarcity is gone and that worry of not having is gone, I could imagine a metropolis, springing up forth from the earth. So you're right. More land becomes usable for people, which in turn not only creates more room, but also gives more breathing room to native species on Earth. There's less need to mow stuff down, which I don't know. For me, I'm a hiker, so I like that.
Right. Yeah, if you don't need to level 80 acres of a forest, and you can actually just put a house in the middle of nowhere because your materials can be transported in or just lowered into you without any real resources being spent to do it. It changes everything.
Yeah.
So
And Script
yeah.
Doctor has a good point there. Thank you for bringing that up. The Mojave is a lush green land now in the
Mhm.
21st century. So you have a bit of terraforming going on Earth. And we know on Star Trek Enterprise, they talk about, was it Enterprise? I'm trying to remember which series it was, but I think it was Enterprise. They talk about some of the weathering machines that keep tornadoes from happening. It measures how much rain areas get, and it kind of, there's an algorithm that basically keeps each of the environments on Earth at optimum levels.
Yeah, are you telling me that
So
I can live in parts of Canada and not die anymore? That's beautiful. I mean, Canada, like the wilderness part of Canada, it's gorgeous, but you can't stay out there for too long unless you're a wilderness person. So
or the
that's
most
a huge chunk of land that's probably usable now.
exactly. I mean, and the best part about that, Phil, is the human effect on the environment would be very minimum, right? Because of technology, it would be able
Zero
to, the
near, yeah.
impact would not be as harsh as if you were to put up a giant ass city the size of El Paso, Texas, in the middle
Pumping
of the
out waste
Yukon.
all the day. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Script Doctor. TNG mentions weather control machine as well. Um, yes, yes, that was the episode I was thinking about because the girl, her parents
Oh, her
died.
parents. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, my brain farts today have been epic. It's because I spent too much time putting together the avatar. But yeah, I mean, so they have the weather machines that keep planet Earth basically kind of like a thermostat,
Paradise.
right?
Yes, the paradise.
So
They use that
that,
word several times in Homefront. Paradise, and that fuels what we're talking about. It's like if you don't have to worry about living, you can just live. You know,
exactly. But you know what? There was also a flip side to that, a negative, which we saw during the Dominion War. It also fueled complacency.
complacency.
Ah,
Yes.
there we go. There we go. And you know what? In the next stream, if you're up for it, we're definitely going to be talking about that complacency with the Starfleet Navy and how they are so caught off guard. But yeah,
Only if Doc joins us. I love talking about the Dominion War and what if, how, and going into
yes,
that stuff. I love talking because listen, I love DS9. It is my favorite Star Trek, bar none. And I think they've done a disservice to the fans and to the lore in general by not going back and visiting that was a huge storyline within the Trek. And how the hell have we not gone back to it in 20 years?
I don't know either, man. I mean, why they skipped 20 years worth of, was it between the end of the Dominion War, Nemesis, and up to Picard was what, 20, 30 years,
Mhm.
supposedly? I mean, I don't know what is possessing to skip such rich storyline there. You have Voyager coming back. You have a decrepit not decrepit, but I wouldn't say broken, but a pretty hurt Klingon empire. You have a broken, shattered Ramen Star Empire, and you have a Federation trying to put itself back together, putting out fires within its own member worlds. Because guess what? It grew so big it wasn't able to defend all of its fronts during the
They
entire
lost
war.
huge chunks of their territory during that war. I mean, they
Yeah,
lost charter members, of home worlds during that war. That's like it was a huge part. And Debris, are we never going to bring them up on charge or hold them accountable for what they did? I mean, it's a lot of stuff that we just haven't talked about. Like what's going on with Bajor? I think they might have mentioned it in Picard, but they never really got into it. Did Bajor join the Federation finally?
right. Did the Bajoran, not the Bajorans, but did oh my god, Counselor Troy's species. Oh my god,
Oh, you talking about the Beta Zeds?
Beta Zeds. There we go.
Yeah.
Beta Zed got captured because their
Yeah.
defenses were so out of date. They never bothered to update it for centuries.
That was all of Starfleet's problems. All their ships, while they had a lot of ships, they weren't made for war. They had one warship in the entire fleet, just one. That's insane. That you can argue that the Akira class was also built or retrofit to combat the Borg, but the Defiant was the only one purpose built for war.
Exactly. No, you're right. But hey, Script Doctor, you're here. I say when we have this conversation about Starfleet's Navy, you need to join us. I don't care how long it takes. We'll figure out on the back end, but you definitely got to join us on this conversation. So you let us know. But yeah, I'm totally with you on that because it was just so dumbfounding. The Cardassian border wars should have been an easy conflict for the Federation to take over, right? They should have been able to swat them like a fly, but they were able to. The Cardassians were able to take a couple good hits off the Federation, which is insane because the Cardassians, even before they were backed up by Dominion, were not on par with the Federation, but the Federation treated them as they were.
A single Galaxy class ship would swat 3 of their ships easily and send them running.
Exactly. So yeah, this is definitely going to be a really fun conversation. But is there anything else you want to tie into about the Sisko's Creole Kitchen before we wrap it up?
I think we covered it. I mean, we took
All
it.
Right.
We went deep into economics, which was the whole point of the conversation. Deep into the economics of Starfleet or Star Trek in general. So
I think so too, and we explored some really interesting aspects. I mean, I my and that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to try to figure out, what would you or I do, right? We were to wake up. Let's say, how awesome it would be. We would wake up tomorrow on 24th century Star Trek, and we had a choice now. The rest of our lives are ahead of us. We just need to figure out what we want to do with it.
I mean, it depends on what we're talking about. Are we talking about like all their technology? Like, because let's be honest, if you introduce holodecks to today's society, people aren't leaving home.
Oh yeah, no, but you know what? as I mentioned earlier, there was a cultural shift, and I think that's really important, right? You can't have one without the other, right? You have the culture, you have the economics, you have the people. They all tie in to one another, and I think because of it all went together, that's why you have the Federation the way you do. But I think we kind of touched on all that because we explored, okay, how the heck would Joseph be able to put together a restaurant? Does he own the property? It's likely he does because, as Script Doctor pointed out, there is property ownership, and we have plenty of evidence for that, whether it's through Kirk, Picard, Riker, and of course the Siskos or even other characters. There is property ownership within the Federation.
Doesn't Riker sell pizzas in Picard?
I think he does have a pizzeria, huh?
Yeah, doesn't he? And another question: what do they do with all that wine?
Well, I'll be damned. I don't think about that. See, I see wine, and it automatically, the first thing that pops in my head is ingestion. So I never really figured out what to do with it other than ingesting it. So you're right. What does the Viner do with it? Again, the exchange, right? The idea of I'm going to exchange this for that. I think definitely has something to do with it. There's got to be again, the whole economics of it is very interesting, and it's well beyond any of the theories that are currently being flaunted or claimed to be what is Star Trek. And I think anyone who'd say Star Trek is an example of X or Y, I don't want to say they're full of shit, but I'll say they're full of shit. I think
They're
they have more of
missing.
an
You're
agenda
missing
than
about
being a
a
fan.
yeah. You're missing 100 or 200, 300 years of human, you know, uh, not just changes, but evolution in terms of society. You just can't turn a
Yeah,
switch and it's going to work. Our mindsets aren't ready for what the the 24th century offers. Simple as that.
exactly. I mean, and Kirk, I think especially through TOS, they did a really good job of painting the picture of, and then DS9 really carried the football. TNG really skipped the subject considerably, but between TOS and DS9, they really kind of focused in on how much of a disaster the 20th and 21st centuries were, which
Yeah.
gives you an idea of the brink that we saw ourselves in. And I think that sort of trauma is what created the foundation of the culture that Earth has now and why people behave the way they do. And how, combined with being in a post-scarcity society, thanks to the Vulcans and their basically the Vulcans building us back up, they are where they are now.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
agree
man.
wholeheartedly.
Awesome. Well, this was awesome, Phil. I'm looking forward to another show. Script Doctor said he is down. He's definitely down. So we will be talking in the background about this, about our next show. It definitely will be involving the Federation Navy, the Dominion, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Maybe popcorn. We'll see.
I look forward to it. This was fun. I love talking Trek.
Same here. I appreciate it a lot, Phil. Script Doctor, it was great having you. I'm looking forward to the next show. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you have anything you want to say before end it up, Phil?
I'm good for right now. Once I have more to share, I'll share it. I'm working on some stuff on my side in terms of my magazine that's coming across. Hopefully, we'll be able to get it off the ground by the end of this month. We have another event coming up, and I want it done before then. So once I have it tangible, I'll let everybody know more about that. So
Groovy. You know what? Once that magazine out, I'll do my part. Share. I want you to talk about it because I'm really looking forward to it.
I'll keep you in the loop.
Heck yeah. Well, everyone, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. This is the Armored Otter,
I'm Philip Pratt.
and we'll see you later.
Later.